And it's time for the pre-show of today's 220-1101 Core 1A Plus study group. Just trying to get my act together on this side. Everything looks pretty good. I'm having challenges with my background picture in a picture. We may not get a picture in a picture today. May have to work that out later. That may just be how it goes. May just be, hello, chat room. Hi, everybody. I am just checking cameras, making sure everything looks good. We're going to get started here at the top of the hour. I have all new questions for you from the 220-1101 Core 1A Plus study group. Oh, boy. Let's see if I can get this in order. I sure would like to get a picture in a picture, but it doesn't look like it is going to be happy with me, which is okay. We can figure out here's a little bit of a picture in a picture. I guess I could do that. Can I show? So here's this screen. Will it go? It won't go that way. There's this screen. No, there's that screen. And then that comes over, and then I can do that. Okay. So we might be able to figure out the details of this as we kind of get through it. All right. You take 3 weeks off, and that's what happens, people. You throw that holiday in the middle of everything. I hope everybody had a great 4th. Now we're back. We got 2 A+ study groups this week, today and Thursday. And then we've got Network Plus and Security Plus both next week. So it's busy, busy, busy. How's everybody in the chat room doing? Thanks for being here. Thanks for making it in after clearly what is a challenging. Wish I could. Oh, there we go. Now I'm figuring out the details. I'm remembering. The muscle memory is coming back. Hello, Dayton, Ohio. Folks checking in from Nigeria. We've got folks in the chat room saw it earlier, from Port Washington, New York. Thanks for being here. Well, thanks for just hanging out. We've got about 5.5 minutes before we get started. So I am just doing my final checks. We are recording here. Stream looks good. I can see the stream numbers, so those look fine. Hello, Bangladesh and North Carolina. Got some folks checking in already with some super chats. Let's see if I can bring up my super chat. There we go. Thank you for the $1.99 super chat, Way of the LAO. Appreciate that. Unnecessary and absolutely appreciated. So that's how it works with me. We got New Mexico here, in San Antonio, in Southern California, and Dallas, Texas. The UAE is here. There's San Antonio. Lots of Texas checking in. Cincinnati is here. South Africa, Landis, North Carolina, Houston, Nepal, Athens, Greece. Got a lot happening here. There's Dayton, Ohio. Thanks for being here. Jacksonville, Florida. Finally, some Florida folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Vancouver, Canada is here. I'll make sure that Mrs. Professor Messer knows. Oh, the nut is just going by so fast. I can't even see the folks that are in Jacksonville and St. Lucia and Austin and Toronto and Midland, Texas. A lot of Jacksonville. There's some Miami. They're in Cayocho. Thanks for being here. The big curve of 826. PowerShell Engineer, a $2 super chat. Thank you for that. That's very nice of you. And as I mentioned, completely unnecessary. I try not to miss these as I go by. Sometimes I do. I apologize now for missing the ones that are coming through. Uncle Phil does not have the 5 for 20 code. That's like 2 years ago code kind. That's way back. I wish that what he was doing stayed that low price. Everything is getting more expensive, it seems. So that's probably not going to work for him. He was talking about creating a new one though. So I need to get with Uncle Phil and get Uncle Phil's fudge. I know all the good stuff is sold out. He's sort of transitioning into a whole new set of flavors. So the old ones are sort of going away. Plus it's the summer, and a lot of what he does is in-person type shows on the weekend. Like he'll go to a craft show or a street fair, and they don't do those in the summer in Florida. And everywhere else, that's where you would do them. But in Florida, no, we don't go out in the summer. It's hot. So no, he's not doing it. So everything's sort of slowing down a little in the summer, and then as it gets cooler out, it gets really, really fast again. I have had the key lime. I've got a creamsicle fudge in my in my refrigerator. So that's what mouse do I use? I think I put my mouse on professormesser.com/studio, but if I didn't, this is called the hand shoe mouse. Do you see this thing? It's enormous. It's kind of hard to see it. Let me get let's get a light, everybody. So this is the mouse. It's a big mouse. If I put my hand on it, it's kind of hard to see. My whole hand just sits on top of it. That's how big it is. It's just enormous. But it's not a vertical mouse. It's a traditional flat mouse, but your whole hand sits on it. So you never have to worry about your hand kind of falling off the side or rubbing on the desk or anything, because it just sits on top. It is so comfortable. It is incredibly comfortable. It's called the Hand Shoe Mouse by, is it Hippus? Yes, Hippus, from the Netherlands. So amazing. How many laptops do I run? I have one laptop in this whole thing. One laptop, and that's showing the presentation. In fact, that's the laptop right there. In front of me is an Mac Studio, and I've got two screens off of that. This is for my video switcher, which is this box that's in front of me with the red and green lights. And then this over here is the streaming device, the streaming appliance I use, which is from Blackmagic. So yeah, a lot of screens are on, but really completely separate types of things going on. I don't tend to use a lot of these. I think this was, whenever you get into things like this, why can I not use my mouse again? Oh, they've changed things on YouTube. That's why. So they're getting rid of a lot of different things in the chat. Okay, what kind of desk do I use? This is a custom-made desk from a company that no longer exists, and it's a big desk. So it's not one you can go out and buy. I guess now the desks that I like now, if I had to replace this one, it would probably be a Eureka. What is the name of the company? It's Eureka with a K. I think that's not the full name, but you can find them. They are definitely out there. Let's bring our chat over here and get it on the left side, because we are very, very close to getting started. I guess I should start the quiz, right? I haven't even launched the quiz. 11:01, it's this one. This is why we do a pre-show, everybody, because I always forget something. We'll launch the quiz. There we go. So now we got, oh, you know what I don't have is my light, is my mask. There we go. So I think I'm in pretty good shape there. The chair is also one you can't get anymore. Yes, you are correct. You are correct for all of that. Okay. Let's see how we do. So let's see if we can get to blah, blah, 12 noon. That looks like we're starting. Let's bring up Keynote. Let's get a green light. Let's hit a play button. Did it work? It did work. Let's go to the next slide. I think with that, we're ready to start. Let's see if I can, let's see if I can remember how to do any of this. It should be great, right? Let's see how it turns out. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2023 Professor Messer 220-1101 Core 1A+ study group, coming to you live from the studio. Thanks for being here. My name's James Messer, and in this hour, I'm going to take you through some Q&A that ties back directly to the CompTIA A+ exam objectives. In the second hour, I would be glad to open up the chat room. We'll take questions from there. A number of you have a few questions that have come up here and there, but I will be more than happy to take your questions from there. So if there's something you're thinking about IT, about certifications, or just about, I don't know, life in general, you're more than welcome to ask that question in the second hour. We would love for you to join us there. I also have for you, here we go, this is how you can participate if you are here live today. And I hope you are here live today, because that live stream that we have going is one where you can, in real time, vote on what you think the right answer is. So the way that you do that is you pop open a new browser window and go to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. That's where you want to go. There'll be a question waiting for you right there. So you can at least see when that's going to be available. You can just stay on that page. You don't even have to click anything. It will just update as I change things on this side, which is really, really useful. There's also an app for this. You can get it from your favorite app store, and you can find that. It's called the Socrative Student app. So go to your favorite app store, download the Socrative Student app, and it will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. That question is one from last month. It's our only question that we redo. All the questions after this are brand new. But I like to have a rewind question so we can make sure that we're able to get in and see everything working properly. This rewind question asks, a laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error. Which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Now, if you think you know the answer to this, what you want to do is go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Our standing rule in these study groups is to not answer it in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, you follow the link that's on your screen here, professormesser.com/QA. Your possible answers for a laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error, which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Is that in Device Manager, Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, or System Properties? Now, if you think you know the answer, answer online. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Well, thanks for being here. We do one of these study groups every month for the 2201101, and we also do one a couple days later for the 2201102. All of this is in our calendar, of course. When we are not here doing a live stream, you can always watch all of our videos on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. So if you're wondering to yourself, where do I subscribe to this channel? Where do I click the bell so that I can be notified? It's at professormesser.com/YouTube. Also have daily A+ pop quiz questions during the week. Make sure you check those out on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, or on Instagram at professormesser.com/Instagram. And I've been thinking about adding some others. There's also, we put those same questions on LinkedIn. So if you like to hang out on LinkedIn, it's professormesser.com/ wait for it, LinkedIn. That's right. So if you're not sure if I'm on a live on a social media or in some type of live site, you can always go to professormesser.com/ the name of that site, and it will get you there. Also want to let you know that sometime in this first hour, I will be giving you instructions on how you can earn a continuing education unit. This is a CEU, and many people collect these CEUs to renew their CompTIA certifications and other certifications for that matter. So you've got a few things that you can go through there. That's our continuing education units. Make sure you're aware of those and listen in sometime during this first hour. I'll give you all the information you need on how you can earn an email from me for that continuing education unit. I'll let you know that we're going to be talking about the 2201101 exam today. There are two exams you have to pass to earn your A+. That's one of them. The other is the 2201102. It was released on April the 20th of 2022. So it's really only been around just over a year now. Relatively young in the life cycle of these. These usually stick around about 3.5 years, which means that we would estimate this exam to retire somewhere around October of 2025. As we get closer to that date, CompTIA will give us more specific dates, but that's a pretty good bet. The important thing to remember is if you're studying here today in July of 2023, you have plenty of time to study to pass your exam. So not a problem. If you're worried about timing, it's nothing you'll have to worry about. The 2201101 exam is a 90-minute exam, and you have to earn a 675 score on a scale from 100 to 900. Yes, it's a bit confusing. Yes, it doesn't make sense, but that's the scoring system. I think intentionally they make it so that you can't reverse engineer it and figure out exactly how the scoring is done. And CompTIA does not share how the scoring is done. The best advice I can give you is just do the best you can on the exam. Answer every question. Make sure that you spend the time to go back through the questions once you, especially if you have some time left over at the end, that will help you the most. Don't worry so much about gaming the system or trying to figure out what questions you should answer or shouldn't answer. The answer is you should answer all of them. So make sure that you deal through or work through the ideas of what happens with these exams. You can find out more about what's on the exam by downloading the objectives. They are free. You can find the link over to the objectives at professormesser.com/objectives. The 220-1101 exam that we are going to deal with today has categories of mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. Now, if you know those different categories, you know those are the large domains that are in the 220-1101, and we'll be taking questions that come from each one of those during the live stream today. Also let you know that we have a replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards on YouTube, and then I will also post an audio-only version of this. And we do it in a podcast format, which is great because a lot of your mobile devices already have podcast listening programs built into them. And you can find out where to subscribe to this podcast at professormesser.com/podcast. If you already subscribe to a streaming audio service like Spotify, Apple Music, and some of the others, you can find that that podcast is already on that service. You don't even have to download anything. So that's kind of nice to be able to have that capability. You may also notice on the replay, about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. We just talked yesterday, but I'm saying hello again. She's going to watch this all on the replay and put in timestamps. You can go back years where Lori has put these timestamps in for all of our live streams. So that if you're looking for a particular question or something that happened in the after show, all of that information will be detailed in the YouTube video description associated with that particular live stream, which kind of makes sense. If you want to find that, it's about a day later because she does go through this manually, probably at 2x speed, I would hope, and go through and put all of those timestamps in for us. So thank you, Lori, for doing that. And I know that others in the chat room, thank you as well. Also want to let you know that we have, when we're not here doing a live stream, we have a great community over on our Discord server. You can find that at professormesser.com/Discord. There is plenty to see there and a great bunch of folks that have really built their own type of community. I'm just facilitating it. They're the ones that are doing all the hard work. And it's a great place to study for people that are working on their Core 1, their Core 2, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other things as well. You can find that at professormesser.com/Discord. You're welcome to join. No cost for that either. Everyone is welcome. It's another great way to study for your A+ exams. Eventually, speaking of exams, you're going to need to take an exam. And if you live in the US or Canada, I'll let you know that there are discounts available to you. You don't have to pay full price on the CompTIA website. Instead, you could visit professormesser.com/vouchers and purchase the vouchers on my site. They already have a discount built in. You don't need a discount code. You don't need to install anything in your browser. They're just already discounted. It could not be easier than that. And if you want to have a look at any of those vouchers, they're there. There's also, by the way, an additional piece, which is my exam hacks ebook, something that normally is only available in my success bundles, is now also available if you purchase it with a voucher. It comes included with the voucher for free, no extra charge. So you're able to take that as a little bonus, something you can't get anywhere else. You can find all of that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Some folks in the chat room are even saying, well, okay, what if I'm not in the US or Canada? Well, right now, that's unfortunately all the ones that I provide. I've been looking at trying to find ways to provide extra vouchers for the UK and for Australia, but currently have not worked out the legalities and tax implications of that quite yet. There's a whole logistics challenge there, but I'm hoping to get through that as well. There may be ways to work around some of that, and we are edging closer, trying to get a little bit inch by inch towards maybe making something like that actually happen. I'm looking over the side of the cliff that I would jump off to make something like that happen. So hopefully that's something we can work on. And hopefully we'll have an answer for you soon to be able to understand if we can make that happen. Let's now go back to that question we asked earlier. The question asks, a laptop reboots automatically after a Windows stop error. Which of the following would disable this automatic restart feature? Would it be Device Manager, Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, or system properties? Now, if you'd like to answer this, you can go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer that. Boy, that suddenly moved really quick there. I thought nobody had answered yet. No, a lot of people have answered yet. Let's see how you answered this question. We'll show the results, and 61% of you say it's in system properties. 20% say it is in device manager. 11% say event viewer, and 8% say performance monitor. You may have seen this before if you're on a system and a Windows stop error. Most of the time we refer to this as the blue screen. Of course, that's not the official name. The official name is the Windows stop error. That blue screen that pops up is sometimes set to automatically reboot the system if it occurs, which may be what you want on a user's workstation. Even if the blue screen occurs, it waits there a few seconds, then it restarts and the user can keep working again. But sometimes you'd like to know when that happened and have it stay on the screen without rebooting, and you can configure Windows to do that. There is a setting that is in your system where you can configure it to automatically restart. It is in the system properties. Here are the properties themselves. You would click on the settings for startup and recovery, and inside the startup and recovery window, you can see there is an option to enable or disable automatically restart. And sometimes that's pretty useful, especially if you are wanting to see that message on the screen. Of course, all of those details are saved in Event Viewer. Sometimes it's difficult to filter out exactly what you need in Event Viewer, and this may be a good way to have everything stop so that you can see what's going on with this system before it is rebooted. So another thing that might help you with your troubleshooting. So the system properties is the right place. 61% of you got that one absolutely correct, which, by the way, was much better than how we had this answered last month. So we may have learned something from the time that we did that, which is really the point of having these. You really hope that you're going to get some of these wrong, so there'll be something to learn once we step through the explanation of those. So there you go. That is the question that we have about our rewind, or a question we have from last month. Now let's focus on some new questions, and that's really where things start to pick up on the live streams, isn't it? So let's start with a question at the very beginning of our new questions today that is not a multiple choice question. It is a performance-based question. Some folks in the chat room have already mentioned this, that when you sit down for your A+ exam, the first handful of questions you get are not multiple choice. A lot of people just expect to sit down and answer A, B, C, D, which is a lot like this last question that we did. But on the actual exam, there will be a set of questions. Usually it's between 3, 5, 7. There's a handful of questions there that you will need to answer that are not multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could be matching. You could put things in a particular order. They could be drag and drop. It's really a question that's asked in a form that's just different than multiple choice. But the content of the questions is exactly what you've already studied from your exam objectives. It's just a different way of asking you information that you already know. So don't worry so much about how the questions are being asked. You should instead worry about, do you know the content of the exam objectives? And then it doesn't matter how they ask the question of you. Okay, enough of that. I have for you today a question where I want you to put things in a particular order. This question asks, sort these technologies from lowest throughput to highest. And I have 5 different technologies here. They are OneStream of 802.11 AC, USB 3.2 Gen 1, SATA Revision 1.0, Thunderbolt version 1 channel of it, and then 1000 base T. So I would like you to put these in the order. Now, if you already think they're in the order from lowest throughput to highest, then you simply need to put into the fill in the blank that I have for you, A, B, C, D, E. But I will give you a hint. It's not really a hint. They're not in order. So you're going to have to find the correct order. Make sure you follow the directions. Make sure you read very carefully which goes first and which goes last. That could be a deal breaker. And put them in the order that you think they should go from lowest throughput to highest. We'll have to figure out what those happen to be. In the chat room, some folks are asking, are these performance-based questions worth more than the others? We don't know. CompTIA doesn't tell us. They don't disclose whether these questions are worth more points than a traditional multiple choice question. In fact, what we do know is that every question's worth a different number of points. Even the multiple choice questions are all worth different numbers of points. And there's some argument to be made that perhaps the performance-based questions are worth more than the multiple choice-based questions. But I would say that we simply don't know. CompTIA doesn't tell us. There's no way to know. There have been people that have completed their exam and did not have time to finish any of the performance-based questions, and they still passed. So that might lead us to believe that perhaps an emphasis in performance-based questions is not necessarily your best strategy, because it could be that the performance-based questions are worth less than the multiple choice. We simply don't know. So my point to you is don't worry about it. Just answer the questions the best you can. Make sure you answer them as completely as you can, and the score will work itself out in the meantime. I think that's the important thing to consider. Now, if you're listening on the podcast again, we want to sort these technologies from lowest throughput to highest. The 5 technologies are one stream of 802.11ac, USB 3.2 Gen 1, SATA Revision 1.0, Thunderbolt V1, that's version 1, and one channel of Thunderbolt version 1, and then 1000 base T. So do we know what the throughputs of these are? Can we guess at some of them? I bet we can. We'll have to figure out what that happens to be. So let's see how you've done. A number of you have put in your answers on this one. I'm trying to see if I can see updates. My screens don't update with the numbers here, but a number of you have put in your answers here. So let's see how you did with this one. Do you remember the order that you put them in? Let's see if you do. Let's now go and step through each one. Let's start with the one, since we're putting them in order from lowest throughput to highest throughput. Let's start at the lowest. Let's start with the very first one on our list. The lowest throughput that I have on this list is one stream of 802.11ac wireless networking. A single stream is approximately 867 megabits per second as its theoretical maximum. So that's approaching 1 gigabit speeds, but just underneath it, which is still pretty good for one channel or one stream of the 802.11ac networking. That's why AC and AX have become so popular, not only for the features that it brings, but also the very high throughputs that it allows us to have over a wireless network. Okay, that's our starting point. That is the lowest number that we're working with, the lowest throughput. So what would be the next highest throughput? It would be 1000 base T, which, as the name kind of gives away, is 1000 megabits per second or 1 gigabit per second. Now, to keep everything consistent as we're reading through this, I'm showing all of the numbers in megabits per second, but you should be able to convert those very easily in your head. So make sure you can do that as we step through the rest of these. Third on our list, next up from 1000 megabits per second, is SATA Revision 1.0 with a 1500 megabits per second, 1500 megabits or 1.5 gigabits per second as its total throughput. Fourth on our list is USB 3.2 Gen 1. It's difficult to remember all these different changes with USB. They keep changing the names of them as they release the newer versions. And then we have 5000 megabits per second or 5 gigabits per second is USB 3.2 Gen 1. Well, that leaves only one to be there in last place with Gigabit V1, one channel of Thunderbolt version 1, which is ancient in computer terms, is 10,000 megabits per second or 10 gigabits per second. We often just say, oh, that's a 10 gig link. Naturally, assuming the person we're talking to understands it's 10 gigabits per second as the link. We can't always assume that, but that is what that happens to be. And those are the 5 different technologies ordered in lowest throughput to highest. So we have one stream of 802.11ac is 867 megabits per second. 1000 base T is obviously 1000 megabits per second. SATA Revision 1.0 is 1500 megabits per second. USB 3.2 Gen 1 is 5000 megabits per second. And Thunderbolt V1, one channel of it, 10,000 megabits per second or 10 gigabits per second. So those are the 5 speeds. Obviously, this doesn't cover all of the speeds that you need to know for the exam. It does a pretty good job of getting a lot of them, though. Make sure you are familiar with these technologies, how fast they are expected to go. That's a pretty important one. You can see that it helps you make a decision. If somebody says, how should I connect this storage drive? Should I connect this storage drive over SATA Revision 1.0 or over Thunderbolt? And you should be able to make a pretty good decision if you happen to know these numbers. That's the value of having this information memorized or having it somewhere where you can pull it out of your mind in an instant so that you can make decisions like that very, very quickly. Hopefully you're familiar with those. That is our performance-based question of the month. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this is that you could have gotten some of them right. You could have gotten some of them wrong. You could have gotten them all right or all wrong, but in a question like this, there's a middle ground. CompTIA has said in a posting that there are times when they could potentially provide you with partial credit. But they've also said there are times when they may not. They won't tell you when partial credit will be used. I would recommend that it really doesn't matter because you can't calculate the score on your own. It really doesn't matter if they give you partial credit or not. The final score is going to be what the final score is going to be. And there's no way to backtrack or reverse engineer it, so it really doesn't matter. There's no way to tell what you got right or wrong at the end of the exam. So I tell people, even though it would be nice to know, it would be interesting to know, we would love to know this information, you're not going to know. You will never know. It's a mystery of life that we will never be able to decipher. So someone back there will be able to do it. So we'll have to see if once we get into the details, if something like that can really work out. But in this case, those are the speeds that we need to know. It is the 5 different options. Hopefully you're able to get them correct, or at least some of them correct, and make sure you're familiar with that as you're studying for the other parts of your exam as well. Let's shift gears now back to another question. Let's go back to some multiple choice based questions where I can at least get 20 or 25% chance of getting something right, even if I don't know what the right answer is. This next question asks, a technician is replacing a laptop display containing inverters. Which of the following would be associated with this display type? Would it be OLED, LED, stylus, CCFL, or digitizer? A technician is replacing a laptop display containing inverters. Which of the following would be associated with this display type? Is it OLED, LED, stylus, CCFL, or digitizer? Now, if you think you know the answer, of course, please don't answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You instead want to follow the link on your screen. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Oh, display technologies. That's where we're starting our multiple choice today. Let's see how well you can remember these. By the way, all of these answers are technologies you should be familiar with for the exam. I didn't make any of these up. Sometimes I do make answers up. This time I did not make up any of these answers. So as you're going through these answers, make sure that if you don't recognize one of them, if it's a term that maybe you feel like you could use a little bit more work, make some notes. If you don't have your notes open your notes right now. Use a note-taking app on your mobile device. Use a note-taking app on your desktop, and something that can be synchronized to all of your devices. And make sure you're familiar with these. It should be extremely simple to step through all of the details of this. See if you're familiar with what these might be. So, but if you don't know what some of these things are, so folks in the chat room are going, I don't know what this is, I don't know what that is, you should write that down. You should not ask the chat room what it is. You should write it down so that you can go back later and do the research on this. So hopefully that's something you can work through. Some of these might be pretty easy for you. Some of them may be a little more challenging. It just depends on what you've studied and how much you know about it. So feel free to have a look at these. So this would be an interesting one. Let's see how you did. I'm looking at noticing the numbers here. Finally, I have to click on the screen to have these updated. I think you guys are doing pretty good. Let's see if you know the answer to this one. How did you answer? The question asked, a technician is replacing a laptop display containing inverters. Which of the following would be associated with this display type? Is it OLED, LED, stylus, CCFL, or digitizer? And if we show the results, we're a little torn on exactly what this might be. We have 39% of you that say LED. We We have 29% of you that say CCFL. We have 17% that say OLED, 14% that say digitizer, and only 2% said stylus. So we didn't get a majority on this one. If we go with the one with the most number of answers, it would be LED. That is the one that got the plurality of the answers. And then second place was CCFL, third place OLED, fourth place digitizer, and stylus way behind. So this is interesting. We're really looking at a display that has inverters. And if you run into one of these, it's probably an older laptop. We no longer see inverters used on the newest technologies. And it's most likely that this older laptop is using CCFL. This is the cold cathode fluorescent lamp. This is a type of lamp running just like fluorescent lights that you might have in a workplace or at home. These fluorescents are behind the LED display or LCD display, sorry, that is on your laptop. So the challenge with that type of lighting is that fluorescent lamps need AC power to be able to work properly. But if you look at the power supply on your laptop, that power supply is providing the laptop with DC power. So if there's DC power in the laptop, where do they get the AC power to be able to power the lights that are inside? Well, they have installed in the back of your monitor, in the back of your display, a small device called an inverter, which takes the DC power, converts it into AC, just so you can light these lamps. You can see it's a little inefficient, but at the time, it was the only technology we really had for backlighting on these laptops. So that's why, if you're someone who is looking at a newer laptop, you'll notice that it doesn't use CCFL anymore. It's now LED. It's now light emitting diodes, which, by the way, are powered with DC power, the same DC power that is used already in your laptop, which is why if you have a newer display using the LED lights as the backlight, you don't need an inverter. You don't have to change DC to AC because you no longer need the AC power for anything. That's why if you have that type of connection for the lights, that type of lighting on the backlight of your LCD, then you know that it is something that is a CCFL or a fluorescent type light that is being used, which means actually the one that came in second place, answer D with CCFL, is the answer that we were looking for. So that is the one that we were hoping to find. And in fact, 29% of you got that one right. Is that the question we'll use next week on the rewind? It might be. We might have to revisit inverters. I think maybe because we don't see them any longer, we sometimes forget that those older technologies are out there. A lot of people think that the A+ exam should only ask you about things that are new. And I think there's probably a good argument there. And certainly the A+ exam does introduce you to the newer technologies. But when you walk into a job in practically any organization, there are going to be laptops that people are using that are 3 years old, 5 years old, that are still in use. And you're going to need to find some way to support those and understand what you're looking at. And so this is a good example of older technology on the exam is still technology that's being used. And because of that, it's a type of information that you really do need to know for your exam. It would not be LED. As I mentioned, LED doesn't require an inverter, so we know it's not that answer. OLED is an interesting technology that doesn't even have a backlight. It creates its own light. If you ever see those LED screens, they're very, very thin. That's because they don't have to have an extra light behind them to be able to see what's going on. So that doesn't need an inverter. It doesn't even need a backlight. So an OLED would not be the right answer. 14% of you said digitizer. Digitizer is technology that will take an analog input like my finger or like a stylus and will convert that to a digital input that can be used by the laptop or the display that you happen to be using, maybe a tablet, for example. But that's very common, but it has nothing to do with an inverter. And then lastly, stylus. I've already mentioned stylus is used often in conjunction with an inverter. And a stylus doesn't require an inverter. A stylus is used in conjunction with a digitizer. A stylus is not used with an inverter. Maybe I should check that as I'm talking. That's the problem with doing 3 things at one time. But the chat room's really good about checking me on those things. I got the best chat room anywhere. They're very good at providing those details. In this case, if you see an inverter, you can automatically think in your mind, this is an older laptop, this is an older LCD display. It has a fluorescent lamp on the backside of this, and it's the inverter that is providing the power for that fluorescent lamp. If you answered D, CCFL, got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. Maybe we can bounce back on this one. We'll move over to this question that asks, a laptop is not able to resolve the IP addresses of any FQDNs. Which of the following would most likely be blocked at the firewall? Would that be TCP/22, UDP/53, TCP/389, UDP/161, or TCP/443? The question again asks, a laptop is not able to resolve the IP addresses of any FQDNs. Which of the following would most likely be blocked at the firewall? Would that be TCP/22, UDP/53, TCP/389, UDP/161, or TCP/443? I'm rethinking whether I should have made a question with so many abbreviations and numbers in it at this point, but there is one single answer. Some folks in the chat room earlier were even saying it's the memorization of the port numbers that drives them craziest. And as it turns out, it's not a pure memorization, is it? It is certainly important that you know these port numbers, but it's probably most important that you know how those port numbers are used. And I think this question asked that very well. As you are putting in the answers, feel free to bring in or to have a look at what these may be, go through the different options. And of course, please no answering in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock it right in there. So we'll have to say how you do. Now, this is a pretty good overview, I think, of the type of questions you will get on an actual exam, because you're not going to get what I call trivia questions on the exam. For example, you will not see a question that says, what is the port number of Microsoft's remote desktop? They're not going to ask you that. And then you have to figure it out. I call those sort of flashcard or trivial type questions. Instead, your flashcard should have that combination, but there should be an explanation of how that port number is used. So think of it as a flashcard plus, a flashcard with more information. It's more than simply understanding what abbreviations are. It's really understanding how the technology is used. Now, as you can see, I can't really even see how many people have answered this one yet because it doesn't show me how many. So I'm just going to, because we've been talking for a bit, I'm going to have a look at the results. The question again asks, a laptop is not able to resolve the IP addresses of any FQDNs. We'll figure that out in a moment. Which of the following would most likely be blocked at the firewall? Is it TCP/22, UDP/53, TCP/389, UDP/161, or TCP/443? And if I show the results, you can see that 49% of you, almost half, have said UDP/53. 22% of you, almost a quarter of you, say it's TCP/443. We have 11% that said UDP/161 and 10% that said TCP/389, which is effectively a tie for third place. And then in last place, only 7% said TCP/22. So let's think about this. First, let's look at the question, which says we're not able to resolve the IP addresses of any FQDNs. So we're already getting some information on this about what things we're trying to do on the network. The term resolve should point you in a direction. FQDNs is an abbreviation that would be nice to know because you would know that was a fully qualified domain name. So already domain names are things that would lead us down the road of perhaps the domain name system or a DNS. And if we know what port numbers DNS use, then we know that DNS uses UDP port 53 to do these name resolutions. Name resolution is just a fancy way of saying we asked the DNS how to get to www.professormesser.com, and the DNS tells us, oh, that's 162.159.246.164. or whatever port IP address it happens to be. I don't even know if that's even still accurate up there, but you will connect to a particular IP address depending on where you are in the world that will find its way back to my web server. So there's a really good example of how UDP port 53 is used to do something like this. And I think that's a really good place to go when you're working through those. Obviously, you need to be able to resolve names and IP addresses. If I asked any of you when we started, what's the IP address of www.professormesser.com, I don't even know what IP address that is off the top of my head. I constantly rely on DNS, and if DNS is blocked at the firewall, no one's going to be able to use an external DNS server to be able to resolve those particular IP addresses based on the names of those devices. So what we were looking for in this particular case was DNS, and we were looking for the port number for DNS, which is UDP port 53. And if we look at the answers for this, we had 49% of you that answered B, UDP port 53. Does it change if I do it? It does not. And you can see that we got pretty close. TCP 443 would be HTTPS. We're not even at the point where we're able to use our browser yet because we're not able to do a name resolution. So it would not be TCP port 443 for that HTTPS. We also have other port numbers on here for 10% and 11% for LDAP and for SNMP. LDAP is used to look up things in a large database, and we've got SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol, very commonly used to connect up and do management of your infrastructure devices, commonly from an SNMP management workstation. And then lastly, TCP port 22 is what we would commonly use for SSH. Only 7% chose that one. That would not be the right answer. And the chat room is correct. It's always DNS. The problem that you're running into is always seems to be DNS. And in this case, your problem was DNS. It was the firewall, but it was because we couldn't talk to DNS. Ultimately, it brings you right back to that. I like that some of you have already worked through the IP address I put here. You tried to browse to that IP address and you got an error saying you could not browse to that IP address, which is by design, by the way. There's a lot of security behind the scenes, as you can imagine. I come from my professional roles as a cybersecurity systems engineer. I've tried to implement as much of those security techniques as possible on my website, and that's a really good example of how you can get there by going www.professormesser.com, but you cannot get there if you go to that IP address directly. So that's a very good example of how sometimes you can go one way to get there, but not another. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. We can talk about that in the after show if you're really, really interested in how this is set up. I'll be glad to explain it to you. But that is exactly the case. That's exactly what you should be seeing. In this case, though, our problem was DNS. We've got UDP port 53 for the DNS, and that is the answer we were looking for. If we're not able to resolve a fully qualified domain name, then we need to make sure we can talk to a DNS server. You've already seen that we've talked about a lot of different technologies already. We've talked about networking. We've gone through some hardware. We've talked a little bit about other pieces, and there's so much more. Obviously, the exam talks about a lot of other hardware, networking technologies. There's security. We have to deal with operating systems and Windows and Mac OS and Linux, so many different things that you need to know about. And if you look at my course, it's 137 videos. And that's the smallest I could make it and still give you the proper information you need to pass your exam. That's why I tell people all the time, what you need is some summarized view of everything that's in these videos. And I've already done this for you. I have created a set of notes that is a list of everything that's in my videos, all of the important text, all of the graphics, all of the charts, all of the important images are in my course notes. These course notes provide you with a comprehensive summary of everything that's in my course. Now, they don't replace watching the videos. I've had people come to me and said, I read your notes and it didn't tell me about this information that I'm looking for. I said, well, that's in the video. These are just notes. You have to be able to watch the video in conjunction with these notes to really get the best possible outcome. And that's why I make them available on my website. Do you think these notes might be useful for you? You can find them at professormesser.com/1101 notes. I also have notes for the A+ Core 1 and the Core 2. There's both digital versions that you just saw, also have physical versions that you can see here. Physical version has exactly the same information. It's just on a printed form in a nice paperback, what they call perfect bound in the industry, and has the same information that you would have in the digital version of these. And if you get the physical edition, you also get the digital edition to download immediately for free. So while you're waiting on this to be shipped to you, you'll at least have the digital version that you can reference. Find out more about those on my website, professormesser.com/1101notes. Let's do some more questions. We've got time for some others. Let's keep this going. The next question on our list asks, a Windows administrator would like to view all of the 32-bit applications installed on a system. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be Safe Mode, UEFI BIOS, Event Viewer, Task Manager, or C:\program files, parentheses, x86 in parentheses? There's a little bit of everything in there, isn't it? The question again asks, a Windows administrator would like to view all of the 32-bit applications installed on a system. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be Safe Mode, UEFI BIOS, Event Viewer, Task Manager, or C:\program files, x86? It's got to be one of those, right? We'll find out more as we step through this. If you think you know the answer, of course, no answers in the chat room, please. You want to follow the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Obviously, it's only going to be available if you're here live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can just follow along. Take your pick from which one of those you think it is. We'll find out in a moment where those go from there. There's a lot to work through. Maybe this is one if you're more familiar with some of the technologies you would run into. Most of the operating system stuff is on the 1102, but there is some operating system information, especially more of the setup and install part. That is one that is available in the 1101. And that's where this question comes from. We'll find out more in a moment of exactly which video is associated with this particular one. So that would be good. If you're someone who's working through the details, this is a good one to be familiar with, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot things in a Windows system. That's exactly where you should go. So have a look at those, see if you know what these happen to be. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's see if I can get this screen to update. There we go. Let's see if we can see how you answered this one. The question again asked, a Windows administrator would like to view all of the 32-bit applications installed on a system. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be Safe Mode, UEFI BIOS, Event Viewer, Task Manager, or C:\program files, x86? If you think you know the answer, let's see if you do. I'm going to click the show results and see if you know what these are. 78% of us, and that's probably the largest number we've had so far today, say that the answer is C:\program files, x86. Double digits, 11% say Task Manager, and then it drops way off to single digits, 5% for Event Viewer, 4% for Safe Mode, and 3% for UEFI BIOS. Now, this is one that you will run into occasionally because it's nice to be able to know on a system what applications are 32-bit, what applications are 64-bit. And maybe you want to upgrade some of these older 32-bit applications, or maybe you're responsible for supporting these older apps. It's useful to know if they're 32-bit apps or not. You will see that Windows, of course, will tell you that it is a particular version. I think probably most of the Windows implementations we see today are the 64-bit version of Windows, but some people are still running 32-bit versions of Windows, especially on these purpose-built appliances and things that only perform one or two particular tasks. The challenge, of course, is that 32-bit apps are great, and they run in both 32-bit and 64-bit versions of Windows. But if you have a 64-bit app, you have to have the 64-bit version of Windows. A 64-bit app will not run on a 32-bit version of the operating system. So how do you know which apps are 32-bit and which apps are 64-bit? Well, Windows installs them into different directories. If you look in the Program Files directory, those are the 64-bit apps. If you look in Program Files x86, you're looking at 32-bit apps. That is exactly where you would find the differences there. That's why that is the correct answer, program files x86, and that's why 78% of you chose that one. That is the right answer. The others, Task Manager, shows you all of the processes that are running on your system at any particular time, but it doesn't tell you anything about whether they're 32-bit or 64-bit, at least not clearly. It's certainly not the best one that we could look at. We have Event Viewer, again, shows you information about the logs on your system, but does not tell you if an application was installed as a 32-bit or 64-bit app. We have Safe Mode, which is great for troubleshooting, but again, doesn't tell you if an application is written for a 32-bit or 64-bit operating system. And the last one is UE5 BIOS. The BIOS is great for configuring startup and hardware configuration details, but doesn't tell you anything about the applications installed on a system. Some of you in the chat room have mentioned that it's sort of weird that the 64-bit apps are x64, just as it has here, 64-bit, x64. That we can follow. But the 32-bit apps are abbreviated as x86. What? Why is it not x32? I'm with the chat room that we as an industry should just call it X32 at this point. But if you go back in the day of the original chips, the 8086, the 8286, the 8386, the 8486 from Intel, those chips, that was the name of the chips. Was that, oh, I bought a 286 computer. I bought a 386 computer. And so that 86, the X86, is really referring to that older platform where you have 32-bit apps running on a 286 processor, a 386 processor, a 486 processor. Now, to make things even easier, the reason we no longer use the numbers of those chips to name them is there was a big trademark lawsuit with Intel, and I want to say it's AMD at the time. And that lawsuit ended up with Intel not being able to trademark a number, which technically is how trademark works, but they were hoping they could call it just the number because that happened to be the model that it was. Well, because the number's not trademarkable, now all of the new chips that come out have a different number or a letter associated with them. Now you have the i9 chips. At the time, we had 586 chips, but instead of 586, it was the Pentium being 5. The Pentium chip was the first one where we started using words to define that, all because it was lawyers. Because of lawyers. That's why we do everything, was because of the lawyers. So that's why in this case, the answer is indeed program files x86 and not x32. So there's a little bit of history there and the reason that we still call things what we call them in the industry, just the way it works. Let's do another question. What? You want a cloud question? I'm glad you asked. Let's do a cloud-based question. This one asks, an employee is using a cloud-based application for client scheduling. The company connects to the application over the internet and only maintains login credentials for the application. Which of the following best describes this cloud model? Is that best described as SaaS, PaaS, elasticity, IaaS, or orchestration? It's got to be one of those, right? All of those are real cloud technologies, just so you're aware. I didn't make up any of them. The question again asks, an employee is using a cloud-based application for client scheduling. The company connects to the application over the internet and only maintains login credentials for the application. Which of the following best describes this cloud model? Is it SaaS, PaaS, elasticity, IaaS, or orchestration? Such great words in cloud technologies. In this particular case, if you want to answer the question, please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. So that is exactly where you would go to make all of that happen. See if you know the answer. I think some of you know this one. You locked it in. A lot of people locked theirs in pretty quick on this one. So let's see what's going on with this one. Folks in the chat room are saying, do you actually read this as it's going by? Sort of. I do the best I can. as it's flying by while I'm doing everything else that you see me doing, changing the video, reading the questions, seeing what you're saying about the questions. There's a lot going on in front of me. So we'll do this and see what happens with that. Oh, in the chat room, they're even talking breaking news that Microsoft won their case to buy Activision slash Blizzard. I'm not sure if that's breaking. I think we all pretty much knew that one was going to happen. But maybe not. Maybe some of us were still worrying about that one. When isn't that going to be something? The Microsoft acquisition of Blizzard, of Activision. Maybe things will get cleaned up a little bit from a corporate culture perspective, because I love the games that they produce. That would be nice to have something that's continues that high quality gaming environment, but with an environment that the people working there can all enjoy and work through. And I'm right now just right in the middle of Diablo 4, so it's top of mind for me as well. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, an employee is using a cloud-based application for client scheduling. The company connects the application over the internet and only maintains login credentials for the application. Which of the following best describes this cloud model? Is it SaaS, PaaS, elasticity, IaaS, or orchestration? 65% of you say SaaS, which is software as a service. Got really a tie for second place between PaaS and IaaS, which is platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. 3% of you said orchestration, and only 1% of you said elasticity. So which one is it? Well, for that, we need to go to our cloud model diagram from our video 4.1 on cloud models, where I've listed for you sort of a kind of a pseudo OSI modelish sort of thing, where the hardware is at the bottom, the virtualization and OS are sort of in the middle, and then the application is kind of on the top. And then we have different things in the middle. Now, if you're doing all of this on your own computer, you are responsible for everything. You have to manage everything from the lowest piece of hardware all the way through the operating system up into the application, and that's your responsibility. But with cloud-based systems, especially things like infrastructure as a service, we could purchase time on a system, and then we could manage the OS and virtualization, or we could manage the applications and things we would put on that system, but we are still responsible for maintaining everything from the operating system up, in most cases with IaaS. Sometimes IaaS will have OS as something managed by the cloud. So sometimes, depending on the cloud provider, you've got an option there sort of in the middle of those things. We also have software as a service. Let's say you didn't want to manage anything. You just wanted to show up, log in, use it, and leave. So if you're, for instance, a Google Mail user, a Yahoo Mail user, a Outlook.com user, you are using software as a service. You don't have to update the software. You don't have to manage the operating system the software is running on. You don't have to do bug fixes for the software. You don't have to manage the hardware for the software. Everything is managed for you. And when everything is managed for you, it's software as a service. There is, of course, a middle ground where some of the building blocks to build the application are part of the service that you would have in the cloud. And in that particular case, we refer to that as platform as a service, where the service provider provides you with everything except the programming of the application itself. But it's okay. They give you all the building blocks to do the programming yourself on their system. So that is where we would focus our efforts. In this case, we're talking about an application where we connect over the internet. We only maintain login credentials for the app, which means the only thing that we would need to worry about is how this is run as software as a service. And that's why, in this case, the 65% of you, the vast majority, I would say here, I know it's only 65%, but it's so far ahead of anything else. You got it absolutely right. That was the correct answer. 16% of you said platform and infrastructure as a service, and hopefully you can see now why that would not necessarily be the case. And then lastly, we have 3% that said orchestration, which is a great way to work through and automate a number of functions in the cloud itself. Well, in this case, we're not automating anything. We're simply logging in and using it and perhaps logging out. And it would not be elasticity, which deals with the ability to quickly grow or decrease the size of the application instances. In this particular case, the only one that really makes sense is the very first one, software as a service. 65% of you got that one absolutely right. That is the correct answer. That's the one we were looking for. And if you answered software as a service, you're 100% correct for this question. Let's do another one. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. We can fit another one in here, right? It's a troubleshooting one. So let's see how we do with this next question that asks, let me see if I can click the right one on my side. The question is, a wireless network is receiving interference from a nearby power transformer. Which of the following would provide a measurement of this interference? Would that be SNR, WPA, jitter, PoE, and 802.1x? It's got to be one of those. They are all real things. They all have to do with troubleshooting. That's as much as I'm going to tell you. The question asks, a wireless network is receiving interference from a nearby power transformer. Which of the following would provide a measurement of this interference? Would it be SNR, WPA, jitter, PoE, or 802.1x? You think you know the answer? Please no answers in the chat room. You instead want to go to the link that's right here, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. That is where you would go. I'm trying to figure out where to click on this screen to have it update these numbers, and it just doesn't do it. It's not working for me. That's, again, one of the challenges of software as a service is you don't get to decide how the software is upgraded. So here we're dealing with Socrative, which is my software as a service offering. See how this all ties back to what we were doing? And because they've made a recent update to their application, it no longer works the way it used to work. I have a feeling, though, that the problem here is a driver error. It's being me. I'm driving it. It's my error. There's probably a button or something I should be pushing or a configuration option I should be turning on. I'm saying that because I just don't want to open a ticket. I don't, but perhaps I will. Perhaps I'll open a ticket when we're done, so we'll be ready for Thursday. People in the chat room have been saying, are these all real? Are these real? Yes, they are. All 5 of these answers are real things, and you should know about them. And we will go through every single one of them when we're done with this question, just so you're aware. I'm going to click again. Do I click over here? Click over here? Click over here? How about I click that? No? Okay. It's not helping. We'll have to figure it out. Yeah, PoE is not Path of Exiles. I will say that. Yeah, if you see an answer that says Diablo 4, Path of Exile, it's the wrong question. It's the wrong test all entirely. Not really going to be there. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, a wireless network is receiving interference from a nearby power transformer. Which of the following would provide a measurement of this interference? Would it be SNR, WPA, jitter, PoE, or 802.1x? What did you say it is? We are really torn on this one. We have 42% of you that say jitter, 31% of you say SNR, and then practically a 3-way tie for last place between PoE, 802.1x, and WPA. So if we go with the top 2 at least, we're sort of in the running, right? Jitter and SNR, it's got to be one of these to be able to work through it. We'll have to see what it happens to be. The thing that really would help the most, especially when you're talking about trying to determine how much noise is in the air. This is the problem, of course, when you're working on a wireless network, is you can't see anything. It's all in the air, and because it's in the air, practically everything around you affects the ability to send and receive data over this wireless network. And one of the ways to measure out how much signal am I getting and how much noise am I receiving is to compare the two in a ratio called signal to noise ratio. It's exactly what we would be hoping to find. The signal, of course, is what we want. That's the good data. That's what we're trying to transmit or receive over this wireless network. Then we also have the noise. In this case, it's a power transformer. It could be noise from another electrical device. Maybe it's another wireless network. Maybe it's a someone who has an actual radio that they're using. If you work in a workplace, there's security teams that have actual radios. It could be someone who has a microwave. They've turned on the microwave, and the microwave is leaking noise and interfering. And the ability to measure how much noise versus how much signal is going to give you an idea of how much data you're actually able to transmit through that network. Ideally, it should be a really big ratio. You want very little noise and a lot of signal. I say it's a really big ratio, hopefully with that type of measurement, not the other way around. If it's a 1-to-1 where you're getting just as much signal as you are noise, that's a really bad ratio. And obviously, if you're getting more noise than signal, then you're in really big trouble because nothing's really going to work on this network. That is what we're working through, understanding the details of this. SNR is a valuable set of metrics. It's one that will help you understand if some of the things that are around you are causing the problem with the wireless network. The troubleshooting wireless can be a challenge without the right tools, but fortunately, this can be done in software where you can actually see this. This is a really good example of using a piece of software that does this. So a lot of this, and in fact, often you will see things on your built-in operating system that can show you statistics like SNR. It may not be a fancy graph. It may just be showing you the ratio numbers on there. But there's so many different ways to work through those. Here's a better view of this, the signal-to-noise ratio. What app am I using for this? This is one. I think there's a Windows version of this. I'm looking through all the apps that I have here that are on my system. I have a few apps that I have to scroll down. I'm trying to remember which one of these it was. I might actually have it in the slide itself. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll put the name of it on the slide because it comes up often. I don't, but practically any wireless analysis utility has this functionality. So you should be able to pull up anything that you're using that can do some type of wireless troubleshooting. SNR is a very fundamental, I won't say it's a basic stat, but it's a fundamental statistic. And practically anything that gives you troubleshooting information about wireless will also tell you what the SNR is. So SNR is what we were looking for, the signal to noise ratio. The answer to this one would be A, 31% of you. That's what we are looking for. That's the answer that can help us understand this. So hopefully that can help you too if you're trying to figure out what the right answer might be. Now, there were other answers here. In fact, you can see that the plurality of you, 42% of you, said the answer was jitter. And although jitter may be a result of problems communicating on the network, the definition of jitter is how often data is received over the network. It's a measurement of how quickly data is able to be received through multiple packets coming through. How much time or how much of a delay exists between packets on this particular network. And a larger jitter can cause problems, especially with applications that are very sensitive to being able to receive data constantly. A good example of that is voice over IP. If you're on a phone call, you need to hear the person all the time as they are talking. And if the jitter starts getting bigger and bigger, you'll start to get dropout or things will not sound properly. And so that's a good measurement on whether the information is being received in a normal rate of time. But jitter does not provide you with a measurement of how much interference happens to be on this network. In fact, jitter may be a measurement you're taking on a wired network. There might not be any wireless network included with this. Jitter deals with interpacket times. And so that's why when you're dealing with understanding where interference is coming from, you're looking for a different type of statistic, and the signal to noise ratio is the better response for that one. 10% of you said PoE. PoE stands for Power over Ethernet. It's a way to power devices across an Ethernet cable without having to plug them into a power outlet. If you've ever looked at a wireless access point in a ceiling or the voice over IP phone that you might have on your desk, you may notice that often they aren't plugged into any power source, yet they're clearly powered. And the power is coming through the Ethernet cable that you're plugging in because they are using a technology called Power over Ethernet, or PoE. PoE does not tell you anything about interference on a wireless network. You have WPA. The wireless is many, many different technologies that you would use, but WPA is certainly one that you can work through. And WPA is great for understanding how to protect the data on a wireless network. It deals with encryption and other technologies, but has nothing to do with measuring interference. So we would not use WPA for that. And then finally, 802.1x is a way to provide authentication to networks, very commonly wireless, but it doesn't have to be wireless. But 802.1x pops open a screen when you first connect to the network that says, oh, you should probably log in. And until you log in, I'm not going to provide you access to this network. Some folks refer to this as a type of network access control, or NAC. It certainly is a technology very commonly associated with NAC. NAC is a much broader set of technologies, but we tend to start and stop with authentication. 802.1x is what we would use to be able to do that. The only one of these important technologies that has anything to do with measuring interference is the one at the top, signal to noise ratio, or SNR. That's what we were looking for. That's the one that makes the most sense here and really fits the best for this question. And if you answered a SNR, you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. This is, by the way, these charts and everything can be extremely useful if you're someone who's working along trying to make that happen. I think that's a good place to go. Grab some of those wireless utilities for your operating system. There will certainly be one in there. It's amazing what you can find sometimes also in those utilities. You may be surprised what's on your network when you start diving into them. I certainly can be surprised at them sometimes too. One of the things you'll notice, although we are at the top of the hour, I have one more question for you. So let's do one more with this. The question I'm going to give you, though, does not come from one that I wrote prior to this event. Instead, it's one that's in my set of practice exams. One of the things I noticed when I look around the internet is that it's very, very difficult to find high quality, well-written practice exams. Even practice exams that I find a lot of people are using, I see that the practice exams have not been updated for the latest version of the exams, or even worse, they leave in older questions that have nothing to do with the latest set of exam objectives. One of the things is I was looking around the internet and I thought if I can't find one out there, I should probably write some myself. So I did. I created this book that has 3 separate practice exams in it. These exams are written to have a similar feel and a similar style as the CompTIA exam. They obviously are original questions that I wrote myself, but I wrote them with the same tone or the same voice, if you will, or similar voice, so that when you sit down for the exam, the style of the questions is not something that's going to be disruptive. It's not going to throw you because you're already used to them because you read my book. I also have a combination of performance-based questions and multiple choice-based questions in the book. There's more in here as well. Let's do a question from the book and see how well you know this. Again, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Let's do a question that I have right in the middle of the book, question C74, really more closer to the end. This question asks, Walter, a hardware technician, has been asked to purchase a system to be used as a database server. One of the specifications for the server requires the system to detect and correct memory errors during operation. Which of the following would be the best option for this project? Would it be parity memory, single channel, ECC, or SODIMM? Now, because this is a PDF, I have the ability to annotate. So if there's things that I want to highlight, I can do that. If I want to choose a particular answer, I can write on the screen with my stylus. I can write on the screen with my mouse. I can color different things. I can do a lot of different pieces to this. So it gives you some things you can use to help make the environment work for you, especially if you want to write notes that you can refer to later. Now, these are all in order, so you can go through these one at a time and mark what you think the answer is. But I also have links built into the test itself. Because it's a PDF, why not throw some links in there? If we clicked quick answer, it would go to page 287. Right now, the page that I'm on is 281. So it would jump over to page 287 and just tell me, is it A, B, C, or D? So I also like to click on the one that says the details, which takes me to page 363. Again, why would you scroll through this manually? Just click the details and it takes you to another page that, of course, has the question at the top again. But we have a lot of different types that are in here that we would work through. The questions that are on here, it tells you the answer is C, ECC, and like many practice exams you would run into, it gives you an explanation of why answer C is the correct answer. So at least we can get an idea of this. Now, the problem when I take questions like this in a practice exam is I get the questions wrong. And a lot of the practice exams that I find online don't tell you why a wrong answer is wrong, but that's the time where we need to learn something. So what I've done in this book is every wrong answer has an explanation. So if you answered A, parity memory, I explained to you why parity memory is not the best answer for this question. If you answered single channel, I explain why single channel is not the best answer. If you answered SODIM, I explain why SODIM is not the best answer. And one of the things I'll tell you is even if you chose answer C, I highly recommend you read through the other incorrect answers because the question you get on your exam might be about single channel. It may be about SODIMs. It might be about parity memory. And unless you've studied up on those technologies, you don't know whether that's the right answer or not. So I of course, always recommend that. Now, if you read the question and you don't even know what I'm talking about, it's a different language, you aren't quite sure what I'm asking, over at the very bottom of the explanation, I have the video where this question came from. So if you wanted more information on the question, you can go to my 220-1101 course, Objective 3.2. The name of the video is Memory Technologies. You can either use your phone to scan the QR code that's there or simply click the link because, of course, it's a hot link in the document itself. And you can find that video and watch the video so you have some context. When you're done with this, it's a PDF, but a lot of PDF readers have a back button. I will click my back button. We're back to where we started. And I can simply go to the next question that's on my list. Those are my practice exams. This might be something that can help you when you're in the final phases of your studying, preparing for your exam. We've got 3 practice exams in here, 5 performance-based questions in each of those. So there's a total of 15 performance-based questions that are in this single practice exams book. Find out more on my website. Go to professormesser.com/core1pe or simply follow the pull down links at the top of the page and you can see more about where you can find those practice exams. Of course, I always tell you if you're looking for free, CompTIA will tell you everything you need to know on the exam for free. You just need the exam objectives. Make sure you grab those. They are available directly on the CompTIA website. I have a link over to the exact page by visiting professormesser.com/objectives or simply go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the page. It's free, download it. That should really be the first thing you're looking through before you even start your studies. It should absolutely be the last thing that you are studying because it's a great checklist to know if you're ready to go and take your exam. A lot of people ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm ready to take the exam? Well, have you checked off everything that's in this list of objectives? If you have, you're ready. If you have not, there's some more studying you need to do. So that's what I would recommend as well, and it's free. You got to love the price. I like free, and that's a good example of some great free tools. We do one of these study groups every month for A+. We actually do 2 A+ study groups in a month, one for the Core 1 and one for the Core 2. Today, obviously, was our Core 1 study group. 2 days from now, on Thursday, we have a Core 2 study group, and the next week we have a Network Plus and a Security Plus. But of course, these times can change, these dates can change. The chaos of my life can cause things to be rearranged in my schedule. One of the places you should always go to check when the next live event is going to be is the link right here at the bottom of your screen, professormesser.com/calendar. That's constantly updated with the latest dates. So if I change something, those will be updated. So that's a really great place to go. If you're part of my Discord, there is an events channel in my Discord that also has these dates and times. So I also update that at the same time. So either one of those is always going to be the latest information. Sometimes I have to make last minute changes. I try to tell everybody. But if you're wondering, did I miss a tweet? Did I not see the announcement on Discord? You can always find it on the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, although we're finished with the part where I ask you questions, Now we do the part where you ask me questions. Stand by for the after show. It's starting immediately after this. You don't even have to do anything. Just stay where you are. I'll put up a splash screen and we'll do the after show in just a moment or two. Don't forget about the vouchers on my website, which are already discounted. You could go to CompTIA and pay full price for your vouchers, but why would you do that? Go to professormesser.com/vouchers if you're in the US or Canada and get the already discounted vouchers available on my website. Also have the course notes and practice exams on my site. If you buy them both, there's a little discount on there too. Find out more at professormesser.com/1101success. We've also got all of these different places you can go online to find us. Just type in professormesser.com/YouTube/Discord/Twitter/LinkedIn/Instagram. We're there. And you can find us easily by simply typing that in and going to those details. Well, that, I think, brings us to the end of our first hour. Stick around for our after show. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let me take a sip, which I think I needed to do 30 minutes ago. Okay, but we are in good shape now. I did not do a super secret code word, which brings up a good point, is what's wrong with me? Why did I not? Let's do a super secret code word, shall we? I've got, let's see, I want to do one that is, something relating to one we did. Oh, we did so if you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, one of the great things you can do, or one of the things you can do to earn the CEU, is to go to my website, professormesser.com. At the top and the bottom of the website is a link for Contact Us. That's where you should go. That's what you should click on. The Contact Us link will bring up a form. On that form, put your name, put your email address, and in the body of the message, or the subject line of the message rather, put July 2023 Core 1. Something like that, so I know which video this came from. And then in the last part of, or in the body of the message, put the super secret code word of the month, signal to noise ratio. You could just put SNR too. Either one of those works for me. Type in signal to noise ratio or put in SNR and send that to me. If you want to put other information in there, make sure you put it on a line by itself, but you can always put any notes to me. I read through every single one of these. So I love it when you put notes in there telling me what you're working on. I finished this course. I got my certification, or whatever it happens to be. I like to read through those. It makes me feel like I'm doing something that can help somebody. It's nice to get some positive reinforcement sometimes. Sometimes it's a bad day. I'll flip over those, just read through them. Makes it all better after that. So that's exactly what we would do. That is where you can go as well. So again, top or bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put July 2023 Core 1. In the body of the message, all by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, signal to noise ratio, or simply type SNR. I'll accept either one of those. And then in about a week, I email you the email that says this email certifies that you were here to watch this and you earned 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. So that at least gets you to that point of understanding the details of what we need to be able to have that. Well, welcome to the after show, everyone. Hopefully we were able to learn something in that first hour. Some folks were telling me that maybe some of the questions were a little too easy in previous study groups. So I thought, how can we make them a little harder? So I tried to turn up the difficulty just a bit. I don't want them so hard that we don't get it right, but I also don't want it so easy that we already know the answers to these. So I'm trying to pick and choose the right balance. It's a difficult task every month to find the right balance of these, because I do write all of these questions brand new for every single study group. So I'm never quite sure, did I accomplish that or not? And then by the time we figured out if I accomplished it, the study group is over. So that's sort of how it works. Now, for what we're doing now, it's the after show, which means I'm not going to ask any more questions, at least none that have been predefined like we've seen before. In fact, now's your time that you can ask me questions. So if you would like to ask a question, I have the up on my screen, the chat from YouTube. If you are on my website at professormesser.com/live, you'll see there is an embedded chat on that page. It's the same chat. It's the same YouTube chat. So you don't have to do anything if you're there and working through that. All you have to do is go to professormesser.com/live or go to the YouTube that is playing this live stream, and you'll be able to see that. I want to start, by the way, thanking Daniel, who I think is thanking me. Says, hello, Professor. Thank you for the material. Last week, I passed 1102 and officially A+ certified. Now studying for Security Plus since that test expires soon. Really does not expire soon. It expires July of next year. We got a year before that goes anywhere. So you're in really good shape. And he says, I'll now be in those study groups. Well, good. We'll see you next week in the Security Plus study groups. We will go through all of those as well. So thank you for the $9.99 super chat, which is great. Thank you so much. And best of luck. Not only congratulations on your A+, best of luck with your Security Plus. All that's always good as well. If you would like to ask a question, simply put it into the chat room. Sort of go through the list of all of these. Let's start with that message that people saw earlier when they tried to visit my site by using the IP address of what we saw. Let's see if I can do this, by the way. I'm going to go back and grab and do the same thing you did when you went to that IP address. I'm just going to stick it in my browser and let's have a look at what it did. Let's copy the IP address. Let's bring up a browser screen. There's all these moving parts that are on my screen. Let's bring it up. Let's paste it in and let's just go to the IP address. Now, if you do that, you will see a message on your screen that says this. So it says error 1003, and then it gives array ID, a date and time, and it says direct IP access not allowed. What happened? This is not me saying this. It's actually on the screen for those of you listening on the podcast. Is what happened? You've requested an IP address that is part of the Cloudflare network. A valid host header must be supplied to reach the desired website. What could I do? If you are interested in learning more about Cloudflare, please visit our website. Was this page helpful? Yes or no? So that is fundamentally how my site is set up. I use Cloudflare as a reverse proxy to my actual website. So first, let's talk about what that is. One of the challenges you have if you're managing a website is that the site itself is out on the internet and it's there for all of the attackers to try to get into, and they will try to get into your site. So you can add a level of security by putting a proxy in front of your website. So people first talk to the proxy. The proxy then talks to you or talks to my site. The site talks back to the proxy, and the proxy finally talks back to you. So there's a middleman, and that middleman is a company called Cloudflare. Now, normally, this is something that doesn't affect you. You never see this happening. Cloudflare is designed to give that stopping point. And what Cloudflare does is look at the information that's going inbound, make sure that nobody's sending in anything that's malicious. If it is, Cloudflare blocks it. So that's one of the benefits of having a reverse proxy. It's also really, really useful if someone is performing a denial of service attack. These things happen pretty much to all sites on the internet at some point, I think. They have a way that you can turn on a way to start limiting access to the site until that particular denial of service attack is over. And they also look for known vulnerabilities. It's kind of an IPS type functionality built into the reverse proxy as well. A lot of nice features that are in there. And it even provides a boost of speed because it can cache information instead of talking to my server as a middleman. If it's already talked to my server, it can simply send the information back without bothering my server again. So there's a lot of great features there. But because that's there, and because Cloudflare is in front and providing services for thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of hosts, you have to be able to tell Cloudflare, I'm trying to get to professormesser.com, and then it will send you on the proper path to be able to get there. Since we're accessing the service through an IP address, it says, no, you can't use IP address because there's 100,000 device servers on the other side of this. Which one of those are you trying to get to? And so you have to have in the header that's being sent. This is done by your browser. It has to put in there professormesser.com so it knows where to send you. So that's where that weird error came from. It's kind of a long explanation, but that is where that odd little error came from. And it's part of the security that I've set up for my site. I have lots of other security features I've built in. This is just one of many. And that's if you're building your own site and you're trying to figure out why would you want to use Cloudflare, it's an amazing resource for the most basic uses of it. It's free. So if you have your own site, you really should be using Cloudflare. And it means that people cannot directly connect to my server through its IP address, even though the IP address is a public one, because I've filtered out. I have a firewall on my server as well, that if somebody tried to directly connect to my server, you're not getting in. Nope, we're going to drop you. You have to go through Cloudflare to get to my server. So that's the real benefit in working through those. Another frequently asked question on my site, hey, is that a green screen behind me? It is not. That's a real background. It's my real studio. It's my real office. I'm in here every day. That is real. I usually throw something back there, turn the lights on and off. That's not a green screen. I really should just put up a green screen of it someday, and then maybe have it, I don't know, slowly rotate. I don't know. I got to do something, right? It comes up so often. I don't know if that's really the case or not. Another question that came through, this one more of a CompTIA related question. How long after I pass the 220-1101 do I have to pass the 220-1102 to earn my A+ certificate? And that's a very good and important question, important answer to know if you are working your way towards earning your A+. The answer is that you have to pass both exams before they are retired. So CompTIA, as I mentioned earlier, works on sort of a 3.5-year cycle. When they introduce an A+ version exam, in this case, the 220-1101 and the 220-1102, those are available for about 3.5 years. And after 3.5 years, CompTIA retires those exams, and they are replaced by a newer version of the exams. But you can't mix and match Core 1 and Core 2 across these different versions. The two that you pass have to be from the same edition of the exam. So you have to either pass your 220-1101 and then take your 220-1102 and pass it, or you could do it in reverse. It doesn't matter which one you take first. You could take the Core 2 first and then take the Core 1. This question is really about not that lower third, but that lower third. How long after passing the first one must you now pass the second one? And the advantage here is you've got until 2025, October of 2025, to pass both of them. I have read places on other websites that there is some type of time limitation between them. Not true. That you have a year between them. Not true. You simply have to pass both of them before the entire series is retired, which means at its worst case, if you want to look at it that way, you could pass the first exam the first day it's made available. So last year, about April timeframe, this exam was introduced. The 1101 and 1102 were released. So let's say you took and passed the first one on the first day it was offered. You then have to pass the second one sometime in the next 3.5 years. There you go. That's the time frame. What you don't want to do is pass the first exam on the last day it's offered, because then you won't have time to take the second exam and you have to start all over again on the new series. That's not what we want to do either. So in this case, it's really great. You got plenty of time. As we sit here in July of 2023, you got until October 2025 or so, somewhere in there, which is plenty of time. Don't worry about the details of that. We will absolutely be able to pass those easily by that time frame. Unless something happens in your life, sometimes that happens and you get pulled away for a while and then you come back. Simply check the times and the dates that are on the CompTIA website. Make sure you check those very carefully so you know if you have enough time to pass that next exam. Pretty important. Other questions from the chat. Let's do some more. This one is from Chloe, who says, any plans on doing a Linux Plus and or Server Plus study group? I got lots of plans, Chloe. I got lots of ideas and things to do. Right now, there are no solid plans for Linux Plus and Server Plus. Linux Plus would be fun to do. I'm my own Linux administrator. If you go to professormesser.com or you're on professormesser.com right now, it's a bunch of Linux servers. It's Linux web servers. It's Linux running a database server. It's Linux running caching servers. It's Linux, Linux, Linux. So I do tons of Linux administration to be able to maintain those. And I love Linux. I've been using Unix and Linux, I don't know, for my entire professional career. So it's something I'm familiar with, but I don't have a formal Linux Plus course at the moment. It's one that I'm constantly looking at because it would just be fun to do. It'd be one of those that you'd have a lot of fun hanging out and working through. And that's one I think that I guess it's in the top 5. Linux Plus, I think, would be in the top 5 today. I always tell people the numbers and what's in number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, those change every day, it seems. But I think Linux is pretty up there. Server Plus, probably not. Probably wouldn't do a Server Plus. It just doesn't have the total number of people to be able to make that one worthwhile. And I think a lot of the Server Plus content's already in A+. I think most people just end up getting A+. So not currently looking at Server Plus, not as high on the list, but certainly one that I'm keeping my eye on. So that's where we are today. Hopefully in the next year or so, you'll see some more courses and things pop up. I've already got new projects going on, new things happening. So there's always something going on back here. But these courses take months and months and months to produce and finally release. So you're going to see things released, in the October, November timeframe this year that have been going on and being worked on since January. So that just gives you an idea of how long it takes to get some of these things produced. And that's with me working full time on this. I can't even imagine. I used to do this as a part-time position, nights and weekends, and I couldn't even imagine doing that now. There's just too much to be able to do, but that's at least gives you some perspective. I'm always open, by the way, to your thoughts, suggestions, ideas of what you think you want to see next. And I really should do a formal survey that's just on my site that everybody just hits to tell me what you think the latest stuff is right now. So Lori's watching this. Lori, send me a note. Let me know that I should set up that survey, put it on my website. We're going to just do that as an ongoing, living, constantly available survey so we can track it as time goes on. Thank you, Chloe, for that idea. So there you go. Other questions. I think here's a good question that goes back to something I mentioned earlier. This is from Otter, who asked this question, who says, do I need to remember pin counts for the different RAMs for A+? I'm assuming it's the DIMM modules you're referring to. I've seen some people say no, and some people say yes. Well, it doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't even matter what I say. The one thing that matters is the CompTIA exam objectives. That's the only thing that matters. People tell me all the time, hey, you said this, you said that. I didn't say it. CompTIA said it. So let's look at the exam. There we go. Let's look at, that's this right here. So let's look at the objectives. Let's go to the actual objectives and have a look at them. So I'm going to bring this up into something we can read. I'm going to just kind of flip through section 1, which is the mobile device section. Let's flip through section 2, which is networking. Where we want to go is section 3, which is hardware. Specifically, not cable types and connectors and those. We'll keep going. Here we go. Given a scenario, install. Let me put this back on something that can properly show you the information. Given a scenario, install the appropriate RAM. And they talk about RAM types, which would be virtual RAM, SODIMM, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5, ECC, single channel, dual channel, triple channel, quad channel. That's it. That's all it has for RAM. Now we can scroll down a little more in hardware. Here's storage devices. That's not RAM. Here's motherboards. Maybe they talk about RAM on here. They sort of don't. There's not a lot of RAM communication, a lot of RAM mentioned on there. So that doesn't help me. And then 3.5 is power. 3.6 is printers. Let's talk about printers, everybody. No. 3.7 is installing and replacing printer consumables. And then we're into section 4. So the only thing about memory in the exam objectives is section 3.2, no mention of pin numbers. And to be fair, as someone who has been using DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4, DDR5, and memory even before that. I don't know that at any point in there did I ever worry about how many pins the memory had. Because if you recall from the videos, the memory is keyed, which means that if you have a DDR4 motherboard, only DDR4 memory will fit in it. You can't take DDR5 and fit it in there. You can't take DDR3 and fit it. It won't fit. It physically won't fit into the motherboard. You can't make it fit. You'll damage the motherboard if you do. So that key prevents you from using the wrong memory. So does it matter how many pins are in the memory? No, doesn't matter. It's going to fit or it's not going to fit. It really doesn't matter how many pins. Now, it's interesting if you're a manufacturer of memory, that's probably an important piece of information. If you're somebody simply buying the right memory and installing it, the number of pins is not your most critical piece of information. And that is reflected on the exam objectives because they also tell you, doesn't matter. Don't worry so much about the number of pins. Worry that you are plugging in and using the right kind of memory. That's the takeaway. And in fact, I think for most technologists, that's pretty much where we sit with this too, is we worry about getting the right compatible components to put on that motherboard. So I would say, now that doesn't mean they couldn't ask you about pin counts. They can ask you about anything. And that's whenever somebody is presented. I see this all the time where let's say that a content creator has provided you with a question that asks the number of pins in memory. And your argument back to them is, but it's not in the exam objectives. Who cares how many pins are in the memory? CompTIA didn't ask us how many pins are in the memory. And then they will point at the exam objectives to a section right at the beginning. They go, oh yeah, but it says in the exam objectives that this is not an exhaustive list. There could be other things on the exam like pin counts. Okay, well, this is a lawyer paragraph that was written because maybe they do ask you something outside the scope of the exam objectives. But I will tell you, as somebody who's produced numerous CompTIA courses, they never go outside the scope of the exam objectives. To the point that if you know everything listed, you know all of the bullets listed in these exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. There's no question. Because you know everything that's going to be presented on the exam. They stay so close to these exam objectives that that's not your problem. Your problem is knowing that huge list of objectives. So whenever somebody says, is this on the exam? Is that on the exam? This person says this person says that. Who cares what people say? Go to the exam objectives. That's the right answer. That's where you will know exactly what is expected of you on the exam, and you'll be in good shape there and being able to work through it. Question on another person, Tyler says, my 1101 exam objectives look different than yours. Well, how do they look different than mine? You want to look and see that you are using the right ones. In fact, let's look over at the exam objectives. Here they are. So one of the things that I find a lot of people do is around this first page, on the very front title is CompTIA A+ Certification Exam Core 1 Objectives, exam number Core 1, and here's the important part, 220-1101. That is the most recent version of the Core 1 exam. If your exam objectives say 220-1001, you have the wrong exam objectives. Throw them out, delete them, do not use them. They are not accurate to the exam. They do not represent a complete and full understanding of what you would need to know for the exam. Only use study materials that specifically are written for the 220-1101. 220-1101. That's what you're looking for. If your study materials have another number, throw them out. Do not use them. Get rid of them. You will not do well in your exam if you use those study materials. So make sure that they match. Pretty important to have that. Same thing for the 1102. Make sure it's not the 1002. Make sure it's not the 902, the 802, the 702, the 602. And if you go out to my YouTube channel or my website, I have courses for all of those through the years. But all of them up to now, is now information you can't use. You must study from the 220.11.01 and 220.11.02 materials. That's pretty important. Other thing, let's keep going through the list of questions that are on here. Other things. I want to keep going and find some good ones that are listed here. So pardon me while I read and talk at the same time, which, by the way, is not my forte. And then Tyler, see, Tyler's on it. Tyler has no problem here. Tyler says, oh, yeah, it is the 10.01 objective. See how easy it is? Because that extra one's not there. This happens to me all the time, by the way, because I have so many different versions of things. So there we go. That solves that problem. That answers that question. Throw it out, delete it. You don't need the 10.01. You don't want to use them. You don't want to reference them. They shouldn't even be around. Throw them out, delete them, and make sure you download the latest ones. Go to professormesser.com/objectives or search for CompTIA Exam Objectives in your favorite search engine and download them from there. Other questions. Let's keep going. Let's go. Other ones that we have here. Let's see if we can fix some of the noise on the screen. I think we can fix some of them. So this is Rick asks, hey, where are you? What's going on here? Where are you? And why are you talking that way? What city are you from? Is what Rick says. I don't know if Rick's asking the chat room or asking me. At the moment, we're in Florida. Not really a city, technically in Tallahassee, but I'm all over Florida. So who knows where I'll be at any particular point in time, but that's where I am at the moment. That's where our world headquarters is for Messer Studios. So we're bringing to you live from the hot, summery Florida weather, which is great in the winter, but perhaps not so great at the moment. It's very warm and muggy outside, but we want you to come here and go to Disney because that's the reason we don't have a state income tax. So thank you for visiting, and we'd love to have you visit and then to go back home again. So that's our goal, is to get you here, have a great time, go home and come back next year. We want you to do that over and over and over again, and we love it. A good point in the objectives is that everything that's there, including the list of port numbers, which I'm going to bring up just because this does come up from time to time. I'm going to sort of arrow down to the section 2.1. I will sometimes have people show up on my site and they will have pages and pages and pages of port numbers that they're memorizing. I don't know where they get these pages and pages from. I'm not sure who told them to memorize all these port numbers, but there's a limited number. And this is them. These are the only port numbers you need to know for your exam: 20 and 21, 22, 23, 25, 53, et cetera, et cetera. They're all listed out for you. And although it looks like a lot at the moment, I think you probably already know some of these. You already know port 80 is web traffic. That's HTTP. You probably already know that the encrypted version of that is HTTPS at 443. So some of these you may already be really familiar with, but you don't have to learn hundreds of port numbers, thankfully. It is nice to know the main ones. I would say this list on A+, that's a pretty good list of the most popular port numbers that you might run into. These lists change over time. Certain applications become more popular, certain protocols become less popular, but those are the ones you need to know for your exam. There's no reason to memorize 100 port numbers. Focus on the exam objectives. I know I say it over and over. You're probably sick of it if you've sat in a number of different study groups with me or in my Discord, because I'm constantly saying, stick to the objectives. Don't go outside the scope of the objectives. Yes, but somebody told me I need. It doesn't matter what somebody told you. Stick to the objectives and you'll do fine. Again, if you know everything that's in the objectives, you will pass your exam. Done. That's really end of story right there. So good to know that. Other questions. Let's keep going through the list and having these here. Other questions on the list. This is a really good choice, and people are talking about port numbers in here, and I think it's probably something to mention. Like Omni even mentioned that port numbers, it's kind of a hard thing to remember, and it is. One of the challenges with port numbers, especially in the A+, is it's a technology that you've probably never had to deal with before, and you've never had to configure them. You're not managing a firewall. You're not configuring the Windows Defender on a daily basis. You're probably not setting this up in an IPS or a reverse proxy or any other technologies. And so you've never had to work with them. So this is sort of like jumping into a whole new rote memorization of things. I approach it from a different perspective because I came across the A+ later on in my career. And by that point, I'd done tons of networking. I'd worked at the protocol level, at the packet capture level, and I was really familiar with port numbers, already knew most of these because you just work with them all the time. So although I will tell you that it seems like it's a challenge, well, it is a challenge, but it seems like it's rote memorization for the sake of rote memorization. The reality is those port numbers will be things that you use throughout your entire IT career and probably afterwards. So I tell people all the time, I know it seems rote, and I know it seems like you're memorizing it just for the sake of memorization. But the reality is it's valuable information you will continue to use for your career, as most things in this exam are. There's not a lot in the A+ exam that you could point to and say, I'm never going to run into that ever in my career, because they really do update it every 3 years and pretty much keep it up to date with the most recent technologies that you would expect to see in a normal enterprise. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it's not unusual to run into these older operating systems because you've walked in the door and they've got laptops from 5 years ago. That's the nature of this beast, is that we need to have a very big encyclopedic knowledge of these technologies because you never know what you're going to run into on any particular day. If you ever are in these big environments, you've got an enormous data center, have somebody give you a data center tour sometime. And you'll recognize systems and equipment. Oh, we just installed that last week. Oh, look at this new library of drives we installed, and look at this new technology we put in. And over here in the corner, this has been running for 15 years. It's running Windows 7 with something else. So the old dusty stuff is over in the corner, but it has to be because it's still running and it's still working. And we now have to have a project where we move out of the older equipment onto the newer equipment. It's not a simple flip a switch type scenario. You run into that all the time. So it's useful if you have some scope, some perspective of the last 5 years or so of technology, because you're certainly going to run into some of it at some point. I would say most of the exam, though, really does focus on kind of the latest technologies. I think it really, really helps. So I mentioned, and in fact, the question here is, Professor Messer, you said that we should remember the port numbers, but is that all we need to know regarding them? I doubt the questions will ask what port number is for this and what port number is for that. You're correct. As I mentioned earlier in the study group, you probably are not going to get what I call trivia questions on your exam, which is 3389, what's the protocol? They're not going to do that. Port 80, HTTPS, or HTTP. Port 443, HTTPS. Port 22, SSH. That's great that you know that, but they aren't going to ask you questions about that. They're not going to say, what protocol is used for port 22? What does port 3389 stand for? They're not going to ask you that. They're going to ask you really more about what you saw earlier in the study group, where there was a problem with the firewall that we weren't able to accomplish a particular function. What port number is probably blocked? We don't want to know what the protocol is. We don't want to know what the name of the protocol is. We don't need to know the abbreviation of the protocol. We're trying to solve a sort of a business problem. What port number is causing our issue with that business problem? That's where everything kind of works back with port numbers. And that's really the most important part of knowing port numbers from a practical level. There is a practical level. Yes, there is practicality here. I promise you. So that's what I would say is that. While we've been typing this, Blake in the chat room with the $5 super chat who says, I passed my A+ on June 15th. Congratulations. Blake says, your videos help so much. I'm trying to swap careers from auto sales to IT. Thanks for your help. Well, I will ask you, Blake, on the exam, Did they ask you for if you wanted the undercoating? Because that's super important on those winter days. There's a lot of salt. You want to be sure the rust doesn't set in. I'm just asking if they ran that by you. Maybe a number. Well, how much per month would you be willing to pay for that? I guess is the question I'm asking. I hope that works out for you. Congratulations on your A+. I have worked a lot, and this may or it may not be where you want to go, but I've worked with a lot of companies that do auto sales. They are obviously very large corporations that own a lot of these local car sales organizations. And of course, there's a pretty big IT infrastructure on the back end of these. And you need firewalls and servers and virtualization and the cloud and all of those things just the same as everybody else does. So I would tell you that you've got a background in a particular area. You're probably exceptionally familiar with the ins and outs of auto sales. And although you may not want to do that, there may be a great opportunity for you to go to work on the IT side of that. So I guess it really depends on where you are and where the headquarters is and what they need. But there may be an advantage to that too. It's one of the things I see a lot of people when they're moving from one type of career and they're changing careers now. They're moving into IT. I always tell people, don't necessarily leave that other career behind. You may be able to leverage that into an IT career. There may be an advantage to doing that, or there might not. My career, I have worked for companies that did insurance. I worked for companies that were a pure value-added reseller at the technical level. And I've worked for manufacturers of equipment like Network General and Palo Alto Networks. So it really just depends on what opportunities are available for you and how it's working out. Along those lines, Tina has the counter argument, which is, I'm a florist. Spin that one, Mr. Professor Fellow, into IT. There's not a lot of IT in florist. However, on the big clearinghouses like the 800 Flowers, there is a pretty big IT component to that. Kind of hard to take the skills from flower arranging and kind of fit them into IT though. Although it would be nice to have more flowers in the IT department. I'm just saying, sometimes it can be a little cold. Maybe that's where we use the knowledge for that. You're right. There are some careers maybe don't quite fit well as a migration into IT. Still valuable skills though, nonetheless. So you never know when they'll come in handy, and being able to work through that. Other questions, other things there. There's a lot to work through. This is a question that comes up from time to time, and I'll give you my perspective of it, which is not a complete perspective. Hold on just a moment. Okay, let me fix my switch here. Now we're working out. Let's talk about this question from Rick that says, hey, what do you think about a bachelor's in computer science? Is it worth it? I guess it depends on what you want to do when you grow up. This is a question I ask myself every day. This is a challenge. Let's talk specifically about the challenge of IT education in our country, being specific to the United States, but I guess it does sort of apply to all of North America too. I don't know a lot about Canadian universities, but I think it's probably comparable in some ways. If you start going to four-year universities, the traditional four-year university in the United States, what you will find is that there is a relative few of them offering IT as a major. There's no IT major. There just isn't one. They don't have one. There are some that do have information technology majors, but the classes you're taking are not necessarily IT-related classes. They're classes where you're taking high-level math, some programming, and maybe they'll teach you about a network, and they're calling that IT, which doesn't quite fit either. It's like not quite IT. And that's really where I've often talked about how there is kind of this misunderstanding, if you will, or maybe a very good understanding of how computer science and information technology fit with each other. And computer science is certainly technical, has the word computer in it, so it must have something to do with computers. But computer science, generally speaking, is focused on application development, programming, and building apps on a mobile device, building apps on a browser, building standalone executables, or building hardware and the software that you need to run that hardware. You're building your own switches, you're building your own firewalls. That's computer science. And certainly an important set of skills, an important career for someone who's interested in that. But IT has nothing to do with any of those things. Very little. If you wanted to put those in a Gantt chart, IT and computer science barely overlap each other. If you work in IT, you're not programming, you're not building applications, you're not creating browser-based apps, you're not building mobile apps, you're not building hardware and building the software that runs the hardware. That's on the computer science side. IT is responsible for the implementation of the infrastructure, for protecting the data, for making the data accessible for these applications, for making sure the applications continue to run and operate, and making sure that all of those systems continue to operate regardless of the circumstances that you might find yourself in on any particular day. What we do in IT is we focus on, if there is a coding part of this, it's more about automation, creating scripts, building out automation for the cloud, which I'm not going to call programming. I guess technically speaking, that is programming, but I consider programming to be someone building an app. And in IT, we don't build apps. When we need an app, we call the computer science folks and we say, can you build an app for me? And then they do that. That's the extent of application development in the world of information technology. So information technology is people that would be managing data centers. It would be database administrators. It would be email administrators. It would be operating system administrators like Windows Server, Linux devices, Mac OS. It would be someone who is managing the network communication, building out the networks, connecting wide area networks, the local area network switches, making sure we have redundancy with those networks, and someone who's managing the security of all of that data, setting up the firewalls, the intrusion prevention, the cloud-based security, making sure that people authenticate properly, checking the resources and logs to make sure that those authentications are performing the way we would expect. That's IT. And so if you look at what universities are teaching and what IT needs for you to be successful, those tend to be two different things. Universities are very good at talking about how to program, but they're not very good, or at least aren't interested in telling people how to manage things from an IT perspective. And this is a really good comparison of this, by the way, what we're doing right now, because IT requires a lot of training. You need to understand the underlying infrastructure and how to implement them, like for installing Windows Server, for example, for managing Active Directory. There's a good example of skills that are necessary, really necessary to do well in IT. But those skills are something you can be trained on and you can learn how to do it. But universities are very famous for saying, we're not here to train, we're here to really instruct you on how to learn properly. They're really focused on things that are not trainable. I don't know what that means, but that's sort of the story they always tell you about this. And if you start looking at, grab a four-year university that's near you and have a look at what they offer. See what they offer from an IT perspective. Are they sending you off to computer science courses? Are they sending you off to engineering courses? Do you have to take calculus? None of those things have anything to do with IT. I got a management degree and had to take calculus. How much of calculus have I used in my years of doing management? None, because it's really gatekeeping. It's either gatekeeping or revenue enhancement. It's one of those two things. So four-year universities are really, really bad right now anyway at providing quality IT training and education. They just aren't good at it, which is remarkable to me because we could really use good people in IT. That's sort of where this whole system kind of breaks down. And what we've done under the surface is we've created these certifications to help supplement people's knowledge because the universities aren't doing it for us. You know who's doing a really good job of it, though, are community colleges. I'm a community college graduate, so I love the idea of community college and getting your 2-year AA degree. But because they tend to focus more on skills that will help you in your life, IT is one of those. Those are great skills to learn. And so you'll find a community college near you probably has a community college course on Windows, A+, Cisco, databases, IT things. And for some reason, they do a better job at IT than the four-year universities do. Now, that doesn't mean that every four-year university is not good at this. I have run across a handful, a very small percentage, but still they exist, of four-year universities that have put together a really good information systems or information technology program. And you can get a bachelor's degree in information technology. And it's a good set of classes that you would take to do that. Unfortunately, they are just too few and far between to be of any consequence in the job market that we have today in the United States. So I think that's why if you ever start looking at where to go to get IT training, it's somehow very difficult to find the right fit. We just have not done a very good job of it. So you see that there are a lot of third-party universities that have stepped in to fill these gaps. WGU has already been mentioned in our chat room. That's a very good example of an organization that's taken this gap in education and applied it specifically to IT and in conjunction with certificates to build a comprehensive IT training program that really is pure IT. I mean, pure IT. Very little outside the scope in that particular program. Same thing for other private universities. There's a number of them around the country that kind of do this. But I think that's a place where if you're trying to get better knowledge of IT, you're trying to get some formal training along the words of IT, the universities are there to help you learn. The universities are not here to help you train on something that is so beneath them. In fact, I think we sort of see the state. Things are changing constantly in the world of universities these days. So we will see what becomes of that, but it's something I don't see changing a lot, at least not in the near future. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll work on that, get a little better at IT. If you're a four-year university, if you're the president of a four-year university and you're watching this, do better on the IT side. Go have somebody create an IT program and watch what happens. It's really, really an important part of what we're doing with technology today that is sorely underappreciated at the four-year university, it seems. Why it is, I don't know. They just do that. Now, computer science seems to be where people go as an alternative. And I don't know if it's the best alternative, but it is one. So you go to a four-year university and get a computer science degree, and then once you get out, you pivot into IT. We're really starting from ground zero, though, because they're not going to help you very much on the computer science side with IT. But that's where a lot of people will do this. They'll go into the university maybe because they think that's where the IT training is, and they get a degree in computer science. Then they get out of school and realize, wait a second, I didn't actually learn any IT stuff. Now I got to start over and sort of get certifications. So it's an additional step for them. Now, most of the employers, though, understand this. So there is a bright side to this, at least a little bit of a glimmer of hope, is that employers know there's not a lot of great IT education out there at the higher levels, at the four-year university level. So they tend to look at computer science as, all right, you went to a four-year college, so you stuck with it. You got a degree in computer science, which isn't what this job is, but the four-year degree says you're trainable. That's really what a four-year degree does. My degree's in management. So that gives you an understanding. I can be trained to do other things then. So we'll move you on even though you have a computer science degree, let's put you in and start you training on the IT side and get you up to speed. And maybe they start you with, you got to go get an A+, and they start you there and you're on your way. Eventually, maybe you pivot that into some automation. Maybe you're the script writer because you're the person who knows the computer science stuff. Maybe you show everybody else how to properly write scripts. I could use a class on properly writing a script. I've written lots of scripts. If you were to look at my syntax, it's like a horror movie. It's who wrote this? Did they understand English? Yeah, I understand. I'm just not good at it. But it worked. It's a clunky put together with sticks and twine and a little bit of bubble gum, but it works. And I'm just going to keep it working. But there's clearly ways to optimize what I've done with scripting. Clearly ways to optimize what I've done with scripting. But sometimes you just need enough to get you there. That's the goal. Let's keep, I know I'm at the top of the hour. I was hoping to get another question or two in before we get through too much of this. There's a lot of people talking about this also as talking about education and dealing with this. It's a sort of a problem everywhere. SNHU, another good example of a good IT program. I've heard about that one as well. I've had to find IT programs at other schools within Florida. And in fact, the IT program, my daughter got an IT degree from a private university in Florida, and I don't think they offer it anymore. So sometimes they were on the right track, and then no, it went away. They just couldn't handle that much good knowledge at the four-year university. I think they were sort of paring down. Universities are in a weird place right now with what they teach and how they teach and what people are interested in going there for. And they've got a lot of challenges ahead of them alone. I think they were trying to optimize what they have left there. And they got rid of their IT degree, which was kind of sad, in making that happen. So that's sort of the way it goes. And maybe this is a good one to kind of end on, because I think it does come up from time to time. The question is, can I pass my A+ if I'm just using your videos as my study material? Well, I guess you could, but why would you do that? That's really my question when somebody says that. I did write these courses to be completely comprehensive. I use the exam objectives as my outline. Everything in my videos matches the objectives. It's a one-to-one. I make sure I cover everything you need to know. And you could potentially just watch my videos. And if you apply yourself, I think you could absolutely get your A+ certification that way. But why would you do that? There are some great books out there that would provide you with another way to learn. There's great labs out there that you can work through, another great way to learn. And there's Q&A that you could do to indeed help you even further. So we've looked at a lot of Q&A today. It's a really good example of how you can learn from mistakes. I got that question wrong. Why did I get that question wrong? Oh, now I understand it. Won't get that one wrong again. I think that's the way it works. If you're interested in labs, I have lots of labs on my site. Go to ProfessorMesser.com, and in the A+ pull-down menu, there's a section there for recommendations for resources, and a lot of good stuff in there. So labs and Q&A, and because it's more than just one way to learn. People learn in different ways, and they learn differently when they learn from different types of training materials. You learn differently when you read a book than when you're watching a video. You learn differently when you're going through a practice exam than when you're doing labs. So I think you should do as much of this as you can. Don't just focus on one thing. And I say this all the time. There's no shortcuts. You can't just do one thing and you're done. I mentioned this to the person this past week that was going through my course notes, and they were asking questions about the things in the course notes and saying, well, what about this? And I said, well, I mentioned that in the video of the course notes. You're watching you're reading that section of the course notes on that video. I talk all about that in the video. They go, yeah, but I'm just reading the notes. You're not going to learn just by reading notes. They're literally notes from my course. They're not supposed to be a comprehensive study of all of these topics. They're there to help you remember what was in the video that you watched. So that's a really good example. Can I just pass my exam by reading my notes? I guess you could, but why would you do that? Don't do that. Always do multiple types of study materials, especially since you look at a book. My videos are free. Books are relatively inexpensive. If you just had a book and videos, you'd be in good shape. So there's lots of things you can do there. There's a lot of great ways to kind of focus on that. So I think that would be a good way to have a good overall study strategy, is to have a video course, a good book, some labs, and some Q&A. 4 things. Those 4 things: video course, book, some labs, some Q&A. You got all 4 of those, you're in good shape. You're going to pass your exam. That's the way you do it. Well, that brings us to the end of another study group. Can you believe it's been 2 hours already? Kind of went through our questions that I wrote. We've gone through the questions that you wrote, but we're not done. Come on back on Thursday. We have an 1102 study group where I have all new questions that come from those objectives. We'll do another after show. If you have more questions, we'll talk about them that way. There's always something to talk about in our live streams. We love it that you're here. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for your ongoing support of what we do on our website. As I often say, I'll just keep making videos until you stop watching them, I guess. We're going to keep going down that line, and this will be a fun 2 weeks as we go through our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups. Always check our calendar to know when the next one is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you for being here. We will see you on the next A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.